Hi, this is Rick Harsh, and guess what day it is? That's right, it's Wednesday. Anyway, uh, I think it's the day that we talk about James Joyce. I'm a writer and a publisher, and I live in the 21st century, and so uh, James Joyce is probably one of the most important writers in my universe. Um, I would like to say that he's one of the most important writers in the world of literature, but I'm afraid that it's kind of a Joycean hat. It's an Italian hat from the Marche region, and I think of all of my hats, this is the one that Jimmy would have worn. I live in Slovenia, very close to Trieste, where, as we all know, he spent a lot of time. It's about I'm on the sea in Isla, and Trieste is about 20 minutes that way, 25 to the center. But what you don't know, probably, is that the next Venetian-style town down the coast, Piran, our most beautiful town in Slovenia, used to be called Pirano, and James Joyce in 1910 got drunk in Piran and passed out, spent the night on the marl stone, special kind of local stone that paves many streets around here still. And he woke up with a problem that eventually led to the infections that eventually led to his blindness or near blindness. By the end, I think he was totally blind, but that happened in 1910, and it's a fact. And I'm holding this up because I'm a humble man. I don't want to hold up, here's my copy of Ulysses. Look at that. You're gonna say, "Wow, that guy, he really knows his Ulysses. He must, because he needs tape to keep it together." Well, I got another copy of Ulysses. And look at that. Look at how beat up that is. Well, I've never read in this book. I don't know. I found it on my shelves, and I don't know where it came from. And this one, I've read once. It might not have been this copy. It might have been this copy. Might have been John DeLillo's or Don DeLillo. It says Don DeLillo, but that's my handwriting. I don't know why I wrote Don DeLillo in this book. Maybe somebody, recommended him. I don't know. Anyway, I've only read Ulysses once. I mean, I've read in Ulysses more than that. But let's be frank here. This is where to start with the the more mature Joyce of Ulysses and Finnegans Wake. You start with, the Stuart Gilbert guide because, he needs, you need a guide. I would also recommend this one, which I did tear apart. This is Stuart Gilbert. This is Richard Ellman's book on James Joyce. And it's in this one that I have the definitive proof, in Joyce's own words, and in 1922 in Paris, after seeing his eye doc, he wrote that, that they determined that the problem started in Pirano in 1910 when he got drunk and slept outside. So I have brought that to the attention of people for years in Piran, and they still haven't recognized it in any public way. You'd think that they would be. You got people who travel to Trieste and take the Joyce tour and things like that. There's a statue of him crossing the is it the Canale Rosso or something like that. But Piran, they've done nothing. They should have a statue of him passed out on the marlstone, and people would visit. It's a short trip from Trieste. probably get some heavy drinking intellectuals. If they've learned anything from Joyce, they would be heavy drinking intellectuals. And having learned from Joyce is kind of the theme of what I want to say today in celebration of Joyce, because I have always felt since I came of age, learned of Joyce, felt I was old enough to read Ulysses, and without Stuart Gilman, I'm a hypocrite. No, I'm a man who learns from his mistakes, and when I read Ulysses again, which I will do it with this, but only in preparation to go through Finnegans Wake with help. Finnegans Wake is a different sort of book. This is all digression before I get to my main points. Finnegans Wake, you don't need any help whatsoever. You could just read it. And I've read it again and again and again. I don't know if I've read every page because I read in it, but I read in it all the time. It's spent years in bathrooms by me. You just lead us not into reformication with the pores in your kingdom of glory, O moan. You can't open this book without something funny. And what does it mean? Well, we've all read a lot about what it means, but one day I'm gonna get a helper book like Gilbert's for Ulysses, and I'm gonna read Finnegans Wake. I'm gonna have a Joycean retirement probably. I don't know, but the thing is about Joyce, he's taught us a lot of stuff, or he's offered us teachings, and what I was irritated by as a young man, a young writer, was that it seemed to me that English literature, and I'm primarily, being from the United States, I'm talking about primarily United States literature, seemed to take Joyce as this singular, amazing genius who we set aside, we study, but we don't learn from. Writers don't learn from Joyce. Now, I think that's to some degree far too true, although many writers actually have learned from Joyce. But what the problem is that the literary world in the United States part of it, which is in terms of imagination, the smallest part, but in terms of money, the biggest part, which makes for a pretty twisted situation. I think if you go to pretty much any country in the world, you're going to find writers, celebrated writers who learned a hell of a lot from Joyce. And but in the United States, that's just not something encouraged. For instance, tell me a writer's workshop where they thrill to Joyce and Joycean writing. I doubt if it happens. If it does, please to be wrong. But so that's something that's always bothered me a lot about Joyce. It's Jimmy, you're so great. Now get lost. We got some writing to do. Raymond Carver, come here. And that kind of thing really bothers me. But one thing we have learned from James Joyce, and we all should, really hold extremely dear, is the need for freedom is absolute. The need for freedom in your writing is absolute, and to this day, it is curtailed for many reasons. The most disgusting and obvious one, and understandable at the same time, is the problem of making a living and money and all of that shit. Geez, if I am too experimental, I'm gonna have a small audience, and there's only room for so many people, like in the vintage literature series of modern greats. There's only one. Well, I don't know. Gaddis didn't even fit in that category until just recently. The New York Review of Books brought out their version of J.R. and the recognitions, but far too late. I mean, great for them, but far too late was Gaddis accepted as in the canon of capitalism, so to speak. Which, by the way, shot me out a long time ago, and published in France, taught in Tasmania. But do you know my name, Rick Harsh? No. The New York Times said no. The editor said yes, but the reviewer said no. And then, bye-bye. But, one thing Joyce taught me is if you're a writer, you write. And you do what you want. And you're free. And you remain free, and, the hell with the rest. So I was having this terrific conversation with a Brazilian person who I only know through Instagram and briefly, and she's at the very least a reviewer and a translator. And I asked about one of my favorite writers, Antonio Lobo Antunes, and he has this book called South of Nowhere that I read several times and I love. It's a tavern confession novel. I have one of those called, oh my God, where is it? Here it is. Skulls of Istria. Now, Camus has one called The Fall, and to my mind, it's not so great, and I believe that mine is better. I'm much more pleased with mine than I am with Camus. I've read mine a lot more, and writers usually don't read their own work after they're published, at least not much. But I love this. I can reread it constantly. But my goal was not had nothing to do with Camus. My goal was to make it at least in the same league as Antunes' South of Nowhere. Well, South of Nowhere was translated again, which led me to believe, and it had a different title, I don't know what it is now, in English, which led me to believe that maybe there was something wrong with the translation, or maybe, I don't know, the title was, I don't know. So I asked this woman yesterday, what is the real title of that? I'd forgotten or not looked it up, or I don't know. And it was Os Cus de Judas. And what that means is the ass of Judas. And I think I understand this well. It's, like some place where you're completely lost. It's about the war in Africa, the colonial wars that Portugal was involved in, unfortunately, under their Salazar. You think Francisco Franco was bad? Well, I don't know if he was any better or worse than Salazar. So Portugal had their own, and they had their own colonial history that is, it fucked up Africa worse than it fucked up Portugal, I'm sure, by far. But there's a lot of fucked up Portuguese because of the so many ordinary Portuguese men were sent off to fight in Africa, and Antonio Lobo Antunes writes brilliantly about that in several books. But South of Nowhere, which is actually the ass of Judas, that's nowhere. I mean, so it's actually not a bad translation. Where is nowhere? South of Nowhere is even farther. So it makes sense as a translation, but obviously, as this person said, it doesn't have anywhere near the power. James Joyce would have used with delight the ass of Judas, and he would have done it in Portuguese and said, you can figure it out. If you can, you in the dictionary, look it up. And I don't know if he even thought like that. I don't think he cared. If he knew about the term ass of Judas. He would have used ass of Judas. If he knew the Portuguese, he would have used the Portuguese. You know, he was Joyce, and he that's what he did. He was free, and we're still not free enough to use the ass of Judas as a direct translation. What you do is you translate it as the ass of Judas, and you put a footnote somewhere that explains the title. And it's that simple, and it's much more powerful. And so there's something we failed with Joyce. Another thing is that invention. Joyce was constantly inventing. Joyce, I remember a wonderful description, brief description of Picasso by Henry Miller. Something about him, you know, this acrobat going from style to style. I don't know, something like that. Joyce was not Picasso, because Picasso was going from style to style, and at a very high level and an inventive level. But Joyce was sort of more. It's hard to call it methodical, but sometimes it actually is. His writing and his ideas and so on. But Joyce was, you know, he achieved one thing and set out for the next, and the next, and the next. Think if Joyce had lived to be 70 or 80 and written, what would have come after Finnegans Wake? Something would have, because the man was a writer and he would have kept writing. So, anyway, invention, the invention of Joyce. He's encouraging invention. And I believe that we've let him down. I haven't. I've tried. I've done. And in a lot of it's not accepted. Although, you know, once in a while a book that's inventive is accepted, but not wholeheartedly, and not often enough. Invention is not the canon, so to speak, should have invention as one of its one hurdle for inclusion, or at least in part of it. It should be much more encouraged. So we've let him down there. In speaking of inclusion, Joyce was a writer of the world. Joyce included the world in linguistically as well. You know, look at me. I live in a country where people speak a language that worldwide is limited to just a little over 2 million people. The Slovene language. 2 million people. I get a lot of shit because my Slovene sucks. But I tell people, fuck you. I have 2 children who were born here and speak Slovene extremely well, and my wife learned Slovene. So fuck you. You gained 3. You didn't lose me. You just didn't gain me. You gained a partial Slovene speaker who celebrates the language. But you know who celebrated it before I did? James Joyce. Good day, Dober Dan. Matom beatum and epsut the fot, and if he was wishful to licture her coddle with chesty chach from his dauber den, and noveny news from Nowell, or tuplots talks from Morienbaths. That's Morienbaths. You can figure a lot of them out. But Dauberg Den. I think there are about 3 times in here where he plays on Doberdan. There are other things. There's some very funny ones with other Slovene bits. Even Little Slovenia. Of course, it was next to. It surrounds Trieste, the Slovene territory, but you know, that's just one language. But Joyce was a writer of the world. He included in his idea, of course, I won't lecture on, and I can't, on Ulysses, but we all know about, you know, the meaning of today and all of that. But in Finnegans Wake, it's on full display. And there is no more parochial reader and no more parochial literary establishment than that of the United States. No more exclusionary than that of the United States. And Balabogu, there are many exceptions. And maybe more and more now. I don't know. I hope so. I hope so. There's a great thirst for great original writing from the United States around the world, but also in the United States. And we see that on social media where people get together and instead of arguing, they celebrate writers like Joseph McElroy, Don DeLillo, Marguerite Young, and I could go on, but not too far because I'd be stopped. I'd say Philip Friedenberg, you'd say who? Well, next year you'll know who it is. Trust me. Another thing about Joyce, technical thing about writing, is that, and this is where Ulysses especially comes in. When Joyce wrote his short stories, let me just tidy my books while I talk. These are books by my press, Corona Samizdat. This is not really meant to be an advertisement, but we've got some great books. And one of them is by Philip Friedenberg, who I just mentioned, America and the Cult of the Cactus Boots, a Diagnostic by Philip Friedenberg. You'll be hearing more and more about this as time goes on. It was just published on my birthday, May 17th. So it's only a couple weeks old, or a month old. And it's selling like hotcakes in a small press sort of way. Over 100 have sold already. Can you believe it? 20 euros, fat book, published in Slovenia by Corona Samizdat. That's pretty amazing. Well, Joyce, one thing that he taught, and Friedenberg does this in his book, and I did this in a book that I'm bringing out this summer that I wrote in the 90s called The Appearance of Death to a Hindu Woman. The style, I changed the style to go along with the content. That's one thing that Joyce does, obviously. I mean, anybody who knows Ulysses knows that he does it. But it was so brilliantly done, and writers are very conscious of style. But Joyce was conscious of styles. And it's something that developed in his life, in his writing life over time. And it's one of those lessons that, again, is learned by some writers, or some writers attempt to. I mean, not everybody can do that, but everybody can try to learn from one of the best writers the world has ever seen. Rabelais is another, by the way, Francois Rabelais. So don't forget Frankie. We don't celebrate Frankie Rabelais. But I've gone on. This has already been 23 minutes, so I have to stop because there is another thing. We've learned another thing about James Joyce, another thing from James Joyce. He was a drunk, and he didn't give a shit about money, and that's more than half right. The money half is absolutely right. If you're a writer, you write, and your life comes second. Your financial life comes second, in my opinion, in Jim Joyce's opinion. But that does not mean that your family comes second. Joyce was a great family man. He had a lot of difficulties because of his circumstances and his needs, but he was loyal to his wife, and his wife was loyal to him, and he had a lot of trouble with with his daughter, and he did use his brother a little bit, maybe more than whatever. But his brother understood. Stani, good old Stanislaus, support him as much as he could. And of course, he got tired at times of it. But you know, he was catering to a genius, and he knew it. But Joyce was a good family man, and so we could also learn from Joyce, the human being. Great man. Thanks, James Joyce. This is Rick Harsh, author, chief editor of Coronel Samsdale, lover of James Joyce.